What's Holding You Back, episode 123. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, Moshe Amsel, and we are in for a treat today. I'm going to be talking about what's holding you back, and really excited about this topic. So we're going to dive into it in just a moment. Just a couple of things before we get started. First of all, if you have not taken me up on a free coaching session offer, and this is not your first podcast episode that you're listening to, and you think that you would find it to be impactful to spend some time with me, then you want to make sure to grab a spot. Pretty sure that we're almost out of slots in August. But please check it out. Go to profitwithlaw.com/free coaching. That's 90 minutes with me where we can get really, really clear on what's holding you back from achieving the goals in your law firm that you are seeking and trying to achieve. So definitely take me up on that. Now, we just launched the book club. So it's called the Reader's Nook, and it's basically a book club for law firm owners or lawyers who are interested in learning and growing. You know that you want to read books. You know it's good for you to read books, but you're not really making the time. So we wanted to create a space for you to join us in reading a book together where we can collaborate, talk about it, have a Zoom call where we can discuss the book. So it is free to join. It is hosted in a Facebook group. You can get there by going to profitwithlaw.com/book club, profitwithlaw.com/book club, or just simply look for the Reader's Nook, a Facebook group on Facebook. So those are the two announcements. Now, interesting story. So I just went on vacation to the Adirondacks in upstate New York, and we were on a lake, and I went out in a kayak, and I didn't realize that the plug, there was a drain valve in the back of the kayak, and there's a plug that goes in there, and the plug was missing in this kayak that I went out with. And I'm not a light person, so 200, mid 200 pounds, and basically I was paddling pretty aggressively. And what was happening is it was dipping the back of the kayak underwater. And unbeknownst to me, water was filling up. Now, I had gotten a little bit of water in the kayak when I got in to the craft. So I had water on the floor, so I didn't realize that water was coming in. And as I'm paddling, I'm noticing that I'm losing some control of my stability and sitting in it. And unbeknownst to me, the back was dipping further and further in because there was water gathering in the back of the boat, which was weighing it down. Suddenly, water started to come into the compartment I was sitting in, and I realized I had a problem. And I had my phone in my pocket. So the iPhone that's supposed to be waterproof in my pocket. Basically, I was trying to get back to our dock or my, where we were staying, and I couldn't keep the kayak upright and rolled over, fell into the lake, and basically my phone ended up getting water damaged and was out of commission. So I was like off the grid for almost the entire week because I didn't have access to anywhere to get it fixed or to get a new one, and it really wasn't that important. I was on vacation. So anybody who tried to reach me or was wondering where the heck I've been, that's what happened. Longer story, when I got home, I'm one of those people that I took my phone apart. to dry it out. And in the process, when I was putting it back together, I was fiddling with a cable that had some pins that were bent, and the screen that was already reattached with the ribbon cables fell down, and one of the ribbon cables ripped. And now my phone's going to be without Face ID permanently, because the earpiece that ribbon cable is attached to is also what controls the Face ID. And when I go to replace it, basically all the reviews say that you lose Face ID because Apple's got some sort of security feature built in so that you can't replace that piece. Somebody can't open your phone, replace it, and then use their own Face ID somehow. I guess it's some sort of security setting or security thing that they do. So I'm going to be in the market for a new phone when Apple makes their next announcement. I don't want to get the current phone because my wife has it, and the camera is so superior that it's actually slow. And when you're taking pictures, you snap one picture, you're used to being able to snap multiples or to take quick pictures quickly one after the other. Well, the iPhone 11 with the 3 cameras on the front, when you go to take a picture, it like processes that picture after you take it, so you can't take repetitive pictures, and I don't want that. So it drives me nuts when I use her phone to take pictures. So that's a little story, nothing to do with this podcast, other than the fact that we're going to be talking about fear. And I titled the episode, What's Holding You Back? And I'm going to spoil the rest of the episode by just telling you it's fear. So no matter what situation you present to me, at the end of the day, it's going to end up being fear that is holding you back. So I wanted to talk about this episode, about fear, to really get to the bottom of what causes us to be fearful. How do we recognize that this is happening, and how do we overcome it? One of the biggest things that comes up for me with my coaching clients on the free coaching sessions I do, which you can sign up for at profitwithlaw.com/free coaching, or in actual coaching sessions, is that many law firm owners want to be proud of what they built. You want to have success so that you can wear that as a badge of honor, so that you can show your children that you've built something successfully, so that you can be able to walk into a room and know that I'm in a room full of lawyers, law firm owners, and I'm one of the successful ones. And when you think about that motivation or that way of being, it kind of starts to give you an inkling or an insight into what might be causing fears that we have. So I want you to table that for a moment. I just, lay that to the side, and we're going to approach this from another angle. It'll all come together soon. So the other thing to know about fear is that there's 2 types of fears. There's, and I'm making this up, by the way, like I don't know if this is, written or published by somebody, but I have named them the unwarranted fear and situational fear. So unwarranted fear is fear that's unwarranted. It's a fear of what might happen when I do something or when I don't do something. And it's basically us predicting the future in a negative way, which causes us to be fearful of the outcome and therefore perhaps never get started or delay getting started. There's another fear, which is a situational fear. And situational fear is when you're in a scary situation and you're fearful for your survival or of the outcome of that situation. So let's use some examples. Unwarranted fear would be something like you know that you need to have live video as part of your marketing strategy. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to do live video, but in this example, you know that you need to do live video, but you've never done live video before. So you start to build up in your mind all of these what ifs. What if I don't look good on camera? What if I don't sound good? What if I've got something in my teeth and people can see it? What if people come and they make negative comments while I'm live? What if I forget what I wanted to say? What if I say too much? What if I take too long? What if I go too short? All of these what ifs that we build up in our mind before doing something, those are unwarranted fears. And I say unwarranted because they didn't happen. You don't know that they're going to happen until they happen. And the reality is that when you start to look at it logically and you start to tear apart each of the fears, none of them are relevant. So if we go back to this example, what if you don't look good? So what? Well, then who's judging you, right? You're afraid of judgment. Somebody else is going to see me and they're going to judge me about how I look or how I sound or how I came across, right? So we're in fear of someone else judging us. And then if I ask you, okay, so what? So what if somebody judges you? It's probably somebody you don't even know. It's probably somebody that you don't care about if you start to think about it, right? Do you really care if someone else judges you? Well, if somebody else judges you, what does that mean? If somebody else judges you negatively, what does that mean? Does that mean that you're not as good as you would like to be? Is that an indicator of how you are? Is that your thermostat, your barometer? Is that how you're able to measure whether you're worthy? And this question, which is at the bottom of every single fear that we have, is all about our ego and us seeking self-love and self-acceptance. I actually learned about this from recently. So I knew everything that I'm sharing with you except this part of seeking self-love and self-acceptance. And when I heard it, it all clicked and it made a lot of sense. I recently was listening to my mentor do an interview with a gentleman by the name of Mark Visser, who is a world-class athlete and trainer, and he is known for riding. He's a surfer who rides big waves. And we're talking about, 60 to 70, 50 to 70 foot waves. And he's basically this is episode 384 of the Mind Your Business podcast. We'll link it up in the show notes, called The Mind-Body Approach to Conquering Fear with Mark Visser. And in that interview, he talks about this underlying fear that because he had a fear, he almost drowned as a child. And then he had a fear of water, like he wouldn't even take a bath until he was 10 years old. And he talks about how his entire career, his entire experience is all about overcoming that fear and proving to himself that he's worthy enough. So he broke it down into this, seeking self-love and self-acceptance. And when we start to think about that, who is the person or the highest level of acceptance that we need to have? And if you really start to think about it, we all want to be accepted by our friends. We want to be accepted by other people. But if you start to think about it, all we're doing is by getting acceptance of others is proving to ourselves that we're worthy. And ultimately, if you can master your own self-love and your own self-acceptance, you don't need other people's approval. You don't need the external factors. You don't need the proof. You don't need the feedback from the rest of the world to tell you that you're worthy, to tell you that you are amazing, to tell you that you're smart, that you're sexy, that you look good, that you are just who you are supposed to be. And if we master that, if we recognize that that's the root of all fear, and we master that, then you can do anything. You can literally do anything because no fear can touch you when you are confident in yourself, when you love yourself and you accept yourself for who you are. So one of the things that I said is unwarranted fear, and I gave examples of that. And the other thing is situational fear. Situational fear is when you're in a scary situation. So imagine that you are driving a car and the car skids out of control. And you're in that moment where you realize you've lost control and you know, who knows what can happen. That is a situational moment where fear can kick in, or fear will most likely kick in. Now, what happens when fear kicks in is that our mind does something, and it either, and this is another thing I learned on the podcast, is just these words. So I wouldn't have been able to put such eloquent words to it. But in this moment of high stress, we have a choice. We get to either react or respond. And most people, without conditioning, without thinking about it, without pre-planning this, would end up reacting to the situation instead of responding. Now, a reaction is where you start to think, oh my gosh, I'm going to die, or this is the end. And it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because at that point, you're going to try to fight to stay alive. So if your car is spinning out of control, and this is just an example, there's so many different scenarios we can paint where this would all make sense. But your car is spinning out of control. If you try to wrestle the wheel to get it back under control, or you try to slam on the brake to get it back into control, that's just going to make it worse. And you're going to end up making the situation worse rather than better. The best way to respond is by not reacting, is by staying in the moment and not thinking about what's going to happen if, but staying in the moment and keeping your cool and being able to focus on what is happening right now and what can I do in this moment to try to correct the situation. I personally went through this. I was driving on one of the New York City highways between Queens, Bronx and Queens. And I was coming around a bend, and it was a wet road, and there must have been an oil patch or something. My back wheels gave out, and my car started spinning. I ended up spinning 7 times, 360 degrees, and across the highway back and forth 3 times. But in that moment that was happening, I recognized that the only thing that I could do is relax and wait for that critical moment when my car would slow down enough for me to be able to take control back. Now, obviously, sure, I could have been hit by any of the traffic that was whizzing by. Any of that was a possibility, but that was out of my control. And what ended up happening was I was able to navigate the car back over to the shoulder, bring it to a stop safely without striking anybody. And as I was sitting there, catching my breath and realizing how lucky I was, a 15-passenger van on the way to the airport lost control in the same spot and slammed into my car, moving backwards at 50, 60 miles per hour. So that car was totaled, and I ended up escaping the situation and then getting my car wrecked anyway. But I was fine, and I was not hurt. But that is the exact situation that we're talking about. We're talking about where something is happening, and in that moment, you can think of the worst, or you can think of the current situation and respond to that. And when you think of the worst, more often than not, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. More often than not, what you're fearing can happen is going to happen, because that's where your mind is. because that's where you're sending the signal for that to happen. You're allowing it to happen by responding and not reacting, by not thinking about, oh, what's going to happen 2-3 steps from now, but instead thinking about what's going to happen right now. How do I address what's happening in the moment at this time? By doing that, by getting really, really focused and centered on what's going to happen, you actually have much more control and ability to correct the issue. So what exactly, how do you define that this is fear that you're facing, and how do you overcome it? And the best thing that I can think of to give you guidance on and advice on is to keep asking yourself the question of why, right? So, I mean, fear, when you're a business owner, fear comes in so many different shapes, forms, and sizes. The key is to recognize that's what's happening so that you can address it, so that you can overcome it. An easy example is just think about how much time you spend or how much effort you spend working on your business. When you're spending very little or no time working on growing your business, what's happening is subconsciously you have one or more fears that you're allowing to control your actions to stop you from taking those steps required to move forward, to make forward progress. And that's a very broad example, but if you start to ask yourself a question of why, if I know that I need to do X, Y, and Z to achieve my result that I want to have, why can I not bring myself to come to do X? Why can I not bring myself to do Y? Why am I procrastinating it? If I know that this is the key to my success, why am I delaying my success? Wouldn't life be better if I was successful quicker? These are the questions you need to start asking yourself, because then you can start to uncover the root of the problem. Then you can start to uncover, why is this happening? Why am I unable to face this? Why am I unable to attack this? And I've done podcast episodes on goal setting, goal planning, getting clear on where you need to go. I'm a big fan of the 90X journal. You can go to 90xgoalplanner.com is I think the website. We'll double check and then we'll link it up in the show notes. And you can get yourself a 90X planner or a 90X action planner. I like the action planner because it's small. It's smaller, easier to carry around, easier to just have with me. It's limited to 3 goals versus 5 goals in the 90X goal planner. But this is not a commercial for 90X. I'm just sharing with you what I use. And I use that because I can take all of the actions that need to happen for me to achieve my goal, and I can write them down in the planner and just make sure that every day I'm working towards that goal. But that is a tactic that works around the fear rather than attacking the fear. Because if you wrote down what you needed to do and then you follow it, then you can't get in your head, and therefore you're not going to stop yourself from doing it. Usually, often the fear is so great, or the hidden forces that you can't identify are so great that even though you're organized and you know what you need to do, somehow something comes up, something happens, and you get derailed and you can't do it. And it's all related to the same thing, which when you start to boil it down, you start to think about it, it's all going to come back to fear of being able to have that self-love and self-acceptance. And it manifests itself in so many different ways. But what I want to encourage you to do is to start thinking about Why am I doing something or not doing something? Why am I taking this action or why am I not taking this action that I know logically is the right next step? Another thing that we often do is because we're fearful of the possible outcomes, we don't make decisions. And this is a big one because not making a decision, it causes you to be frozen in that state. So if you need to, for example, you need to decide whether you're going to use Google pay-per-click or Facebook ads as your next marketing campaign. Well, when you can't decide, you don't make a decision, you end up in limbo. Your marketing is frozen. It's on hold. You can't do anything with it. You can't move forward because you haven't made a decision. So not making a decision is often rooted in fear. Because why are you not making a decision? Well, I'm afraid I'm making the wrong one. So what? Why? Ask yourself why. Why am I afraid of that? If I just made a decision and moved forward with one, I would find out pretty quick whether it's the right decision. And if it's the wrong one, I can go back and choose path B. I can choose the other one. I'm not married to my decision. Sure, you may be signing a contract with somebody, you may be out some money, but it takes money to make money. It takes making decisions to make money. And when we stand in fear of the outcome, that didn't even happen. It's an unwarranted fear. I have to choose between two marketing options. And I'm afraid that one of them might not work, or I'm afraid that one of them might be too costly, or I'm afraid that one of them might be too risky, or there's other fears. I'm afraid it might work. Why would you be afraid it might work? Well, I'm afraid it might work, and therefore I'm going to get too many new leads, too many new clients. I'm not going to be able to handle them all. And then I'm going to let people down. And then I'm going to have poor customer service. And then, everyone's going to know that I am the worst law firm in town and nobody's going to come and use me. We build up these fears out of thin air, out of what ifs. And the reality is that you're never going to know. You're never going to know what could have happened unless you actually do it. You take the action. So, but if you start to go down that road completely and you go all the way to the end, ultimately it's going to come down to when you keep asking yourself why or what if. Okay, so why? So what if that happened? So why is that bad? Why am I fearful of that? Keep asking yourself that question, and you'll get to the root of the fear. You'll get to the root of the problem. And once you're at the root of the problem, now you can address it. Up until then, any tactic you use is just going to ignore the underlying fear. It's going to ignore the problem. And you want to overcome it. You want to attack it. You want to be able to nip it in the bud. You want to be able to recognize the next time this particular fear is rearing its ugly head. You want to be able to become tactile in overcoming this so that you don't go through the same process every single time that you're faced with it, or that this particular fear is stopping you from taking that next step or moving forward. So hopefully this made some sense to you, and I encourage you to go listen to episode 384 of the Mind Your Business podcast, The Mind-Body Approach to Conquering Fear with Mark Visser. Certainly does a very good job of talking about some of the tactics that he does with professional athletes, things like that, as far as getting them to recognize how to overcome fear, how to be in the moment, how to respond instead of react. I could not just come here and repeat that information. You got to go there and listen to it. But hopefully this was helpful to you, and you can now recognize what's holding you back. You can now recognize why you may not be able to move forward. And as soon as you start to overcome these things, you're going to make massive change, massive difference in your business. So hopefully you can address this, identify this in some ways that works for you. And obviously, if you're struggling with this and you're trying to get to the bottom of it, one of the things that we do when I do a free coaching session, one of the things that I do is I try to help you identify what that fear is. I try to help you identify. We go through an exhaustive list of what might be holding you back from achieving your results. And then we go into how does that affect you? And what's the worst way that it affects you? And why is that the worst way that it affects you? And when we go through that process, it helps us identify what is that underlying fear? What is the underlying motivating factor that will drive you further, that will get you to go past all of these things and achieve massive results? And I want that for every single one of you. So go to profitwithlaw.com/free coaching, grab a free session. I'm looking forward to having a chat with you. If this is your first time tuning into the Profit with Law podcast and you enjoyed this episode, would love it if you would subscribe to the show. Just hit the subscribe button in your podcast player. This way you know when we release a new show. We release new shows every Tuesday and Thursday. Tuesday is a solo episode just like this one. Thursday is a guest interview, and I'm really excited and looking forward to the guests that we have coming up. Later this week, you're going to hear from Ben Glass, who is a well-known author in the law firm success business, and really had a great conversation with him. I'm looking forward to sharing that with you this Thursday. So until then, go conquer your fears, get past what's holding you back, and start to ring that cash register. Start to become profitable so that you can take your wealth and change future generations. Take care. Have you been enjoying the show? We sure hope so. To make sure you never miss an episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button in your podcast player app. Next week, we will be back with more valuable resources and ideas on how to break the mold and take your law firm to the next level.